Welcome to Truth Uncompromised. I am your host, Rhonda. Join us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Truth is peace. Truth is justice and freedom to love, live, and be. Music provided by SourceVibrations.com. I am love. I am peace. I am free. I have abundance. I have everything within me. For I was, for I am, for I always be. We are love. We are peace. We are free. We have abundance. We have everything within us. For we are, for we will always be. For Mother Earth is love. For Mother Earth has peace. For Mother Earth is free. For Mother Earth has abundance. For Mother Earth has everything within her. For she was, for she is, for she will always be. And so it is spoken. So it has been written, and it is done.
All right, family. Welcome to the Truth Uncompromised show. I am your host, Rhonda, and tonight is Thursday, September 27th. We have a great show planned for you tonight. Tonight's topic is dealing with the ego, egotizing the ego. So we're going to, number one, kind of get straight the etymology of the word ego and get into a little bit deeper of the ego and traits of being egotistical or egonizing. And then we also have a lot of follow-up items tonight I want to go over with the family. We are going to go over some of the news events and then, a lot more. So sorry about that, family. I was trying to bring up my stuff. That's why I'm kind of pausing. So with that said, let me bring on my co-host. I see Brother Sean and Sis Sandra in the queue. So let me bring on Brother Sean. Peace and love, brother. How are you?
Peace and love, sis. I'm well. How about you?
I'm well. Good to hear your voice.
Likewise.
All right. Let me bring on Sis Sandra. Peace and love, sis. How are you?
Oh, peace and love to you, family, and Rhonda, and brother Sean. I'm doing good.
You're doing well.
Peace and love, sis.
Good.
I'm looking forward to these follow-ups, especially when we get to the news.
I know. And I guess I forgot that I dropped it, to be honest. I think we had a couple shows. We had so much information to get in that I cut it out because when we were on the other platform, we could go however long we wanted to. But Blog Talk, we're restricted to time. So yeah, we definitely gonna bring back the news. So let's get started. Okay, so first of all, let's start with go ahead on with the fuckery.
All right.
Okay. Here's my take on it. This is my go ahead on with the fuckery for the week. There's several things, but the first one, they're kind of the same thing, but the first one, I know you all you had no choice but to know that they convicted Cosby.
Yeah.
On some rape charges. I haven't been following it closely.
From 2004. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
and you know, my whole thing with it, and the reason I say go ahead on with the fuckery, because if those things are true that he supposedly and allegedly done, they knew he had been doing that shit for decades. Okay?
Yeah.
Let's start with that. They knew if it's true what they're saying that he did. Then my second part with the go ahead on with the fuckery is just the pure fact that I feel it's a psyops on the public in general. So I just find it interesting that all of a sudden they're so concerned about women abused sexually, being sexually harassed, because you got that other dude, you know, all damn day they've been having some hearing or some shit on dude that's trying to get confirmed as a judge. So his whole hearing is about supposedly some stuff that he did when he was in college. So
High
to
school
me,
too.
oh, high school, okay, well shit, I didn't even know it went back to high school. So
high school.
yeah, so they ain't never damn been concerned about women being sexually harassed, raped, and all of that. As far as I'm concerned, it is a psyop on the people. The Cosby thing I found interesting is that he was tried and convicted in Philly. So I kind of did a on that one. You know, yeah, because we know that Philly is also the place where the de jure, quote, common law government is in play too. So that's my go ahead on with the fuckery. I feel that, and I'm not for or against Cosby with the rape stuff, because shit, I don't know. And with the other guy, the judge guy, I truly don't give a fuck about that. But I'm just saying go ahead on with the fuckery, because it's, to me, it's a psyops in both instances on the public. So I'll yield in case somebody else has something to put on it, or you have your own.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to put something on that. All right, the chick, she said that with the dude that's up to be a judge, this took place back in high school, that she had attended many parties with him and his partner, and that this was happening at every party to females, but at around the sixth party is when it happened to her. So, I mean, you still kicking it to parties and everything with
right.
them, while rapes are allegedly going on. Parties.
Exactly.
And then the thing with Cosby, he the only person that went to jail behind all this. All these Caucasians have been Weinstein all the way on up to Daddy Bush. They've all been accused of stuff. And ain't nobody went to jail but Cosby.
Right. Plus the priest. You know, let's not forget the motherfucking priest that's touching and molesting these babies.
Right. And then the chick who the thing with Cosby, she said that she willingly took the drinks. I mean, that's just the way that people party now. Molly's and ecstasy and this, that, and other. It was the same thing back then.
Yeah, they called it something different. Yeah, they called it different names, but you're right.
And the woman, she was stalking Bill after that. Introduced her family, all type of stuff. You got raped and you sending somebody love letters and introducing your family and all this, that, and other. I mean, what? Didn't none of them know he was married before they went to,
right,
whatever they was trying to do?
Right.
I mean, it don't make no sense to me. I mean,
no,
the whole
it
movement.
doesn't.
Because if you could just accuse somebody of something back in high school, who didn't grab booty in high school?
You know, it was interesting. I thought about that. I'm like, shit, it's a lot of, you might as well lock up every motherfucking body then. Because
no proof.
I mean, go back to grade school, that 7th or 8th
right.
grade time. I mean, everybody
was
on lockdown. Right.
Put on your dress, Stop it.
Right. Being managed, you get to slap the hell out of them. Right.
Right. But my thing is this. If we could bring up stuff like that and prosecute people, the fact that they're here and every law or statute that they wrote is evidence of their crimes, because they ain't supposed to be here in the first fucking place.
Right.
So,
right.
Every goddamn thing that they didn't do. I mean, even like, if we could just bring up rapists, that or the other. What about all the times Master was sleeping with the slave girls and creating all these mulatto children?
Mulattoes,
Aren't those children in themselves proof that the rapes took place?
Yep.
I'm just saying, I mean, if we don't lock people up and take their money, I mean, we might as well take all their money and lock all them up. You can't profit from crime.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's a psyops, because you probably heard, both of you all probably heard about they're saying that even the whole OJ thing, the whole trial, was a psyops.
Right.
So that's what even more is kind of, and I don't know if that's the case with Bill Cosby. Again, don't get me wrong, I don't have any proof on this, but either way, either they're planning this out as a psyops, meaning that none of it is really happening, or it's still a psyops because they're playing with people's psyche, showing that the system of white supremacy still have power over the melanated man. Okay, that's the psyops that is being played on the public, because the system of white supremacy is being shut down. From a spiritual perspective, we didn't already talked about that. It's a done deal. But physically, the system cannot sustain itself. Okay, and even if folks' psyche, which that's what they're doing with these psyops, is to try to get your consciousness to still buy into the bullshit, to give them extra time with the fuckery. But because of the age and the vibration, the numbers and the energy is not on their side either. So that's why I feel that this is nothing more than a psyops, and because Cosby is in those secret societies.
The contract's up.
Exactly. Exactly.
The contract.
Contract is up. Absolutely. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sis.
Well, in my day, they used to say, "Oh, honey, they ain't nothing but a man." That's how a man is. But they're making these things, I believe. I don't think that what he's nothing but a man is an excuse for bad behavior. And don't get me wrong,
No.
but
Right.
that's what the society used to say. That's what a man will do, honey. That's just like a man. Don't worry about all that. And they just swept it under the carpet. But I think that it's a vibrational change that's happening. I didn't even say that, but where did that come from? But anyway, it's a vibrational change, and they are making this a distraction. They're using all things to take your mind off of what really is going down.
Exactly.
And they're keeping it out of the public's eye and keep your eye on some crap about some kid 17 years old groping some female. And I don't know how old he is, 50-something years old now, and they're going to bring up his teenage years. I'm like, my goodness. They didn't say nothing about Bush when he supposedly killed somebody. He ran him over at 17.
Right.
They didn't say nothing about that.
Right.
So it's all a game. This Russian stuff is a game. Nobody votes for anything. It's all foolish. They are appointed to office. And this man will be appointed if he's going to be appointed. And it doesn't care, they don't care if the Senate votes or not to vote, this dude is going to be there. Because it's all a game for people to think they have some control. But I think it's a cover-up. I think they trying to hide something. Things are happening on this planet that's unexplainable, and they don't want people to see it, and they don't want it to be spoken of and talked about. So and then they're going broke. So they try to make war. They over there threatening Iran and Russia and China and everybody.
Right.
They don't tell nobody that stuff. They're trying to make war with them. So this is what I'm saying. It's just a big distraction.
Absolutely. And I see you, 727. I'm coming right to you. And, as far as I'm concerned, just that whole Me Too campaign that you so damn concerned about women.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And this is all to the whole the male-dominant patriarch system.
Mm-hmm.
Don't feel you can suck up to the feminine divine to think we're going to be asleep to let this keep going on. We are up on our game, and that whole system has fallen. We have to bring balance back to Mother Earth. So ain't no need you trying to put some trickery up with this Me Too stuff. We see through exactly what you're trying to do, and it's not going to work. Okay, so that's the other side of that coin, too. You're going to start seeing them, and you're starting to see them gradually push women forward in the spotlight. You're going to start seeing them do it more and more to give the illusion thing is changing. Women are equal. Woo, 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 woo. That's to consciously trick you into letting the same system stand. That's the same on the corporate side. All this shit about reset and this and this and that, we're not going for any other fuckery. All of that corporation system, all of the white supremacy system, all of the patriarch system, it's gone. Bottom line. And it's not what I say so much, although I'm in agreement with it, it's what the vibration level says. It will not stand, and it cannot stand. So let me go to 727.
Hi, good evening. This is Cheryl. How are you all?
Hey, sis. How are you? Good to hear your voice.
I am well, thank you. You mentioned that word illusion, and I want you all to please know this is all an illusion. Bill Cosby has been taken down by transgenders. The 58 of those accusers are not women. They are putting them forth to us as though they're women.
Amen.
These are men.
Right. Amen.
Who are pretending to be women.
Right.
And they now have legitimized it through their transsexual agenda. You really have to open your eyes. They're not working to bring the feminine in or to change this to a matriarchal society. The men are pretending to be women, and we're being deceived again. So keep your eyes open. He's the victim. Well, no, really, his wife, Camille, is the victim because all of these accusers, look at them, check them out. They're transgenders.
They look like it, too.
They're all men. They're all men.
I said, wow.
And he has worked with the MK Ultra program since he was in the military. They even had him stationed in Argentina and at Antarctica. So it's a lot that's not, that we will have to uncover.
And thank you for bringing up that transgenderism, sis. I know we talk back and forth on Facebook about it, and that's something else that will be uncovered. Because when I first started finding out about it, I'm not going to lie, it was through the YouTube videos. And so I was just I wasn't believing it. And then the more and more I kept looking at different people putting up the evidence between the physical characteristics between a man and a woman,
right?
It really, I'm telling you, family, it will blow your mind. Now, I would say they're about 90% correct. Some of them, I'm like, no, you're off, but they're 90% correct, and it's taught me how to identify the difference between a man and a woman's body, things that you cannot, that you can't hide or get away with. And it's been going on for a long time. Don't think that they just started it, because a lot of those stars back in the 30s and the 40s, a lot of the leading actresses were actually men.
They were men.
Even in tennis, which blew my mind. They showed some of the quote tennis stars back in the 20s and 30s, and I'm telling you, because they didn't have the technology back then, they just straight put a wig on the person. And I'm like, whoa. So this thing runs really deep. And if you think about it, actors, there was no such thing as actresses.
Correct.
Back in the day. Let's start with that. There was no such thing. It was all men, and they played the part of women. So once I started,
and they're still men.
Yes,
hasn't much changed.
I would agree.
They've just
most of them are.
They perfected the deception.
Yes.
And they have so many of our men, we've talked about them wearing the dress. Yeah, they'll put on the dress because they're into another man. And they are keeping that before us. Eddie Murphy was another one. All of them. They all. The little short guy that I can't stand, Kevin Hart. They're all into men.
How about Clooney? Clooney seems to be a little strange.
He's a man. He's not a woman. I mean, he's a woman.
His wife.
Yes. Some of the men that they put before us are actually women. I swear Donald Trump is a woman. I've never seen a man with a behind that wide before. If you look at his body structure.
He is
and
hippie.
The women that they are presenting to us are actually men.
Yeah, it's been really, really deep, family, because when we did that show on secret societies a couple of months ago, a lot of these secret societies, when you move up to the higher ranks, you have to go through certain rituals. Okay.
Yes.
And I do know one of the rituals across all of them secret societies are public humiliation, and then they get some dirt on you behind the scenes. Okay. So in case you want to go rogue, they got something on you. So one of the rituals for the public humiliation is the putting on the dress in public. So, and if you look back, most of those stars, if you want to call them stars, fallen stars or fallen angels are what they're imitating. But anyhow, most of them have gone through these rituals, and it even crosses across the sports as well. So it's just not actors and actresses. It's sports,
all of the entertainment industry.
All of the entertainment and music.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm considering that
so,
also, yes.
So, thank you for that, sis. Now, family, I'm not trying to tell you what to think or any of this. I don't dress those people in the morning, nor do I sleep with them. I'm just sharing with you what I found and what I see with my eyes. And it's interesting because now I can look at a person and pretty much pick up whether or not they're transgender based on their body structure, based on their jawline, based on the shoulder to hip ratio, and which is another thing, because as a woman, I was wondering how these women, they're not really hippie. Something's off. I don't really see no cellulite. If you got a big ass and some thighs, you're supposed to have something somewhere. So something is off. But so just pay attention, because ever since the matriarch society was overthrown, what we have been living through is patriarch man dominated. And part of that is the imitation of mama. So that's what the whole transgenderism is about, as far as the controllers or the colonizers. That's why they are doing it, to give the illusion that, women are still in play, which in their world, women are not in play. The only use women have in their world is to bring life into the world. And they're trying to change that. That's what a lot of this AI is about. And you're going to see them try to gene slice and all of that. So just pay attention to what's going on. But thank you for that, sis. And I think there's even some videos out there talking about a lot of the Cosby accusers, if not all of them, because like I said, I haven't followed it really closely. I think it's a video out there busting them out as being transgender. And the one lady with the curly hair, she looks straight like a dude. I mean, shit. I can't say nothing further.
It's just ugly. I mean,
yeah.
Bill had to be the one that was high if he touched back. Hell, how was he? Hell, he needs to be suing for that. Hey.
But they was getting messed up.
And this and that.
But like sis said, they was doing drugs back in the day, and I'm gonna have to dig for this Sidney Poitier movie, y'all, because I really like Sidney Poitier's movies. I'm just starting to. No, it's another. This one, a lot of people aren't up on because they filmed it in the UK, in Britain, and this lady that played this part, I looked at this lady. I said, "That's a damn man."
Guess who's coming to dinner?
Nope. It's like I said, I'm gonna have to find the movie because it's not one of his popular movies. So I'll find it.
With Love, didn't that take place in the UK? To Sir with Love, didn't that take place in the UK?
No, it's not. To Sir with Love. This one, it was way off the path. It was this lady that supposedly was an African queen that had sickle cell anemia.
Oh.
And So I'll find it and I'll share it with you all. So anyhow, I'm looking at this movie, and when she came on the scene, I said, "Oh shit, that's a man." So I'm just trying to tell you how far back this goes. And during the 60s time, when they were in that sexual revolution, it's kind of almost like it is today. Only difference is that the homosexuality and transgenderism was hidden. And if you ever don't believe what we're saying, go to YouTube and check out videos about Richard Pryor admitting how he dipped and dabbed in homosexuality, how he was kicking it with a transgender. His ex-wife confirmed that. And Richard Pryor even busted out somebody else as well. So these are the things behind the scenes in Hollywood of what they are doing. It's not new. They've been doing it for a long, as far as I can see, forever. And it goes back. It comes out of those secret societies. So, but very, very good point, sis.
Oh, one other thing, too, I heard about Bill Cosby. He and about 2 or 3 other melanated people were trying to buy a TV studio or a radio studio or something. And
NBC.
they told him, what'd you say?
He was trying to buy NBC.
And they told him he couldn't, he don't have enough money. And they said they took all of them down after that.
Right, because here's the thing, and I see you 111 Anonymous. I'm coming to you, sweetheart. Here's the thing, just like you said, sis, the contract is up. When you go into those secret societies, you have to follow the script. You have to follow the script. So obviously, it was not in his script, or he wasn't high enough in rank from a secret society perspective to even be making moves like that. And I think soon after that, his son wind up passing, getting killed or something like that. So, yeah.
Well, that's a contract, too. You have a contract to have to lose something dear to you to get the blood offering that they need for you to continue.
Right. So, yeah, it's all contracts. And we talked about that word contracts in etymology when we talked about the spell of language. So a lot of these folks maybe not going in initially, they know what the deal is, but truly when they get past a certain monetary amount, I can't remember if that was 25 million or 50 million, they go through yet another ritual and they enter and understand what the stakes are, and they agree to that shit. They agree to it because that contract is really a spiritual and soul contract that they're dealing in. That's really what it is.
From my understanding, his son wasn't a blood sacrifice. It was actually a warning for Bill to quit trying to buy NBC.
Yeah, that's what I was told too.
That's when Bill started going against the grain. Then he just wouldn't let it go. He still kept saying about NBC. Still got to the point that they said, okay, we just gonna take your money and put your ass away.
Right. We're gonna pull your card. Plus, also remember that you when you're in that particular agreement with folks, you have to continue to make them money. So that's why you'll see a lot of these entertainers, they claim they die early or whatever the case may be. It's because they're no longer generating the type of funds that they want, so they pull that contract. So, there's a couple ways getting rid of them totally, meaning bumping them off, killing them. And then the other way is them faking their own death.
Right.
Look into that, because a lot of these quote-quote celebs are really still living. They have just given up the character, because what you see before you in the public, it is a character. That's not that true person. They take on a character.
I understand they clone them, but they also kill them when they are on top of the game, because they make money when they're dead. More money.
Yes.
There's more dead than alive.
That's right.
Absolutely.
See, they don't have to physically kill them to do that.
They kill the character, exactly.
Right, and they can no longer, the person who played the character can no longer profit off of that. But the corporation can still profit off of it.
Exactly. Absolutely. And that is really especially the case in music. That's why it's always a battle in music for the artists to own their own content. They call it owning their masters and all of that. So, yes, absolutely, Brother Sean, absolutely. Okay, let me go to Anonymous. Sorry about that. Anonymous 111 is what you're showing up as. Greetings, peace and love. Your line is open, Anonymous. Not sure if you want to be on, Anonymous. Okay, I'm putting you back on mute. You might have pressed *1 by mistake. Okay, so and thanks, Sis Cheryl, for coming in, bringing that up, because I didn't want to bring in the transgenderism, because I know that's another level, and that's hard for a lot of folks to wrap around their head. But her point is very well taken. Okay, all right. So there is a couple of things that I wanted to, follow-up items that I wanted to go over. One, we talked about the 2020 census, and I don't think we went over this last week, but we have, and if I did, I apologize. I try to cross off things that I went over, but just so you know, the Indian, and I hate to be like this, but it is what it is. The Mongoloid Indian, the Mongoloid / Spanish / Mexican Indians, or $5 Indians, are all watching the 2020 census as well. One article, I think I did go over this last week, under Indian Country Today, talked about how that their tribes could lose a lot of money if their folks aren't participating in the census to be counted. And they're saying that the government is they feel purposely not putting enough funding. Matter of fact, they cut funding for the census. So just once again, just want to make you aware that a lot of people are watching the census. I found it interesting that the Mongoloid Indians who have been receiving the benefits are concerned about that 2020 census, and then other folks are concerned about the categories where you have to specify where your lineage comes from. So in other words, it's just not good enough to select white is just not good enough to select African American. You have to be pretty specific. So that's just something for us to pay attention on.
You know, I want to bring up something personal. I just took my Social Security and started changing it. I got a new application and started putting American Indian.
Engine. Right. But they did use to say engine back in the day. Yep. Sis.
Yeah, and so what I did was I put non-citizen national because being a Mongoloid, they're part of the U.S. government. And people don't understand the U.S. government is not anchored to this land. They are not Americans. They are a corporation. So these people who go under the U.S. citizenship, like some of our people who sold us out, their trust is controlled by the government. Their land trust is controlled by the government.
When I found that out, sis, I was blown away. I said, "You got to be kidding me! Where are they running around here talking about sovereignty?"
Yes, right. And so anyway, I called today because they had. I've been calling for a couple of weeks now, a week, because it was like in August when I sent my stuff to them with an affidavit. I made up an affidavit swearing to my identity. So they done kept all my stuff.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Yeah, they scared of Davis, but go on, sis.
So you give them that, and I gave them a new update on my status. And so when I went in person, they refused to do it because they got this idea of what an American Indian is supposed to look like. So I turned around and sent it in the mail to them. So they kept it. So I spoke to the lady today and asked her, where's my stuff? You know, you got my driver's license, you got the Social Security card, you got my affidavit. Where's it at? She said, well, we're looking for your naturalization. And I said, well, what naturalization? Well, you have to do your naturalization because you're not an American citizen. I said, listen, there's nothing about a naturalization because I'm an American Indian, and there's no such thing as I have to do naturalization because I was born here before the Europeans even came here. She said, oh, well, that's not what they thought here. So the woman who kept everything finally got the understanding, and what they're doing now is updating my records because they're going to have to go get my birth certificate certified by the state of Texas because I was born in Texas, and then they're going to change my records. So if anybody want to get stuff changed, you're going to have to go through that route. And I said, oh, you're going to do that? They said, yeah, we're going to have to change all that.
Yep.
So everybody wants identity change for the census. You got to go through the Social Security to get them to change it. Because they put it in the record, and then they won't change it because they keep saying, oh, that's a third-party census. That's a third party. That's the third party. No. When you get pulled over by the police department, the government has entered in your race as Negro, Black, and colored, and African American. And you need to have that changed, and they have the right to do that. So they just run us in circles because they changed us from color to mulatto to Negro to Black to African American. And then they don't even say we're Americans. They just say we need to be naturalized. That's what. So when the census comes, this is going to be important for us. You do have to do.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You do have paperwork. You have to do paperwork. You have to proclaim who you are. So anyway.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, sis. Thank you for sharing that, and to just let people know the difference of the naturalization, and which is why I'm so strong and adamant about classifying yourself outside of the U.S. because you'll mess yourself up. So you have to know what you are doing. So sis just gave you the formula. Now, as far as the census is concerned, anyone that is researching your heritage, that's to me, now this is just my humble opinion, I'm sure behind the scenes on some of their records, the National Archives is one of them that I could think of, why it's important, but it also leaves a trail for the future generations, okay? So now when future generations are checking heritage, if you have changed on that census to what you are, that will make a huge difference as well. Okay, so sis is right. There's two things, and this is if you choose to do it. You don't have to choose to do any of this, and I'm not advocating for you to do it or not to do it. That is your personal choice, your personal journey. We're just sharing information with you. But yes, the census will leave the public record side of the house. Okay, so the generations to come and your lineage will see that. Okay, and then the back side, the private side, is what sis is talking about. Okay, so they're literally going to change, going back to vital statistics and updating her records to reflect. Okay, so that's the public side is the census, and then behind the scenes, privately, is that the vital statistics, vital record side, and it behind the scenes in their system will flag you differently. So
yes.
Very, very good information, sis.
You know, I want to reiterate this because this lady called in and talked about we need our naturalization. If you are naturalized, you are not an American.
That's right. That's right.
You are not an American. These programs are telling you lies. If you naturalize, you become a non-entity as far as an American is concerned.
Right.
You do not have an American identity. And that's what she said. We need your naturalization. I said, for what? I was born in this country. My people been here for thousands of years. We're American. So then she said, oh, but see, they got that. They know what that naturalization means, but we are being lied to by our own about that naturalization stuff.
Exactly, and that's why they automatically assumed that you wanted to be nationalized, because so many of our people are being told to go that route, and it takes you totally off of these lands. And
that's right.
Why I'm adamant. I'm sorry. Go ahead on, brother.
My thing is, they knew who we were when we first came. They know who we are now. They have everything documented.
But you have to tell them.
No, we don't have to tell them anything. They know. You telling them to them is basically giving them more time. It's keeping it alive. You going through steps, through hoops that they already know. They know who they took this shit from. All that's still part of the game. Any and all paperwork is going to them. Period. This shit gotta stop. We gotta stop playing the game. Period. Fuck their paperwork. Take your paperwork and get the fuck on. If we want paperwork, we'll create our own goddamn paperwork. Get the fuck out of here. Period.
Any of that is within
the system. Period. Any paperwork is within their system. They created it. Who we file that shit with? They look at the shit like, oh, okay. Well, they know that. Okay, now what they gonna do? Not a goddamn thing. Because all I'm gonna do is turn around have somebody killed or pretend like they killed, and then everybody gonna lose their goddamn minds and lose focus again. The loss of celebrity, this, that, or the other, offer them a couple dollars. It's all bullshit. It gotta stop, period. It has to go. Fuck the paperwork. We at war. Who we still filing paperwork for? And like our people up there that's about to do something about it.
Prisoners of
It's
war.
all they people.
Right.
It's all an act. It's a play.
It is.
But they playing for keeps. We just got to stop, period. Don't do a goddamn thing. Stop.
Yep.
If we stop for 7 days, this includes you so-called good white people and good whatever the fuck else you is just chilling over here.
Right.
If all y'all supposed to be good people, go back home and don't do nothing. Go protect your shit. All y'all ran over here. And now you want to be brave and tough over here? Go be brave and tough at home, motherfuckers. This shit got to stop. If y'all supposed to be good people, y'all know this shit was colonized. Y'all know y'all getting over.
Yep.
Go home. Leave us alone.
Yep.
All the paperwork and everything is there so we can retrace and find out who we are. Thank you for keeping good notes.
Yeah, because they kept
But
down.
we ain't got to file a goddamn thing. We can just read the shit to know who the fuck we are. Know who the people are. But it ain't about filing nothing. Fuck them.
Yep.
We keep kowtowing them. Think we got to keep doing paperwork. All this is keeping that alive. If we supposed to be gods and all this, that, or the other, I mean, why the fuck we still playing this punk-ass game when we getting our ass?
Very good point, brother. Very good point. Very, very good point. Only last thing I just want to add is, and I know I keep harping on this, but the only reason I harp on it is so people can enter and understand the games that are being played with the paperwork. Is a lot of misinformation is going out there to select the status of white. And we've talked about this before, that, you know, if you select white, you have to say, what is your origin? And white Caucasian is not of the origin of this land. And now the other side of that coin is, excuse me, like Brother Sean said with the paperwork, they know who we are, which is true, because that Negro title, they already know that that means indigenous Indian to the land. They already know African American means indigenous Indian to the land. From my understanding, they even took off some of the states and counties race off of the birth certificate, which I found funny. So Brother Sean is correct. They already know who you are. And to be honest, they know it even just through your name. They know through your surname who you are. And based on your parents and your grandparents and where they were born, they automatically know who you are. Because just like when you start researching your genealogy and you start going back, you can match up your genealogy to the wars and the takeover on the American lands, and that shit gonna start making sense. So he's right. They already know. But if you do choose to go that paper route, be very, very, very careful. And I'm not trying to tell you neither here nor there what to do. That is your decision. I'm just saying be well informed if that's the route that you choose. Let me go with 832, brother 832. Peace and love, brother.
Rhonda! Sandra!
Peace, brother.
Sisters from other misters. Sean, lighten it up. My brother from another mother.
Brother.
Okay, let me take the baton, brother, and run to the next phase of the relay. Naturalize from the Etymology Online Dictionary. Admit an alien to rights of a citizen. 1550s. Implied in naturalize. From natural, adjective, in its etymological sense of by birth. Add I-Z-E, in some instances from Middle French, naturalizer, from natural, of things from 1620s, of plants or animals from 1796. Okay, let's kick that around for a minute, my sister. Backtrack to the first sentence. Admit an alien.
Yep.
So who the hell are we talking about?
Yep. It's not the indigenous people of this land.
An alien. So, Sandra, you already knew what you need to do and respond. But when you got these people, and I'm talking about the Moorish brothers and sisters, Moorish Science Temple of America, talking any kind of shit in the context of paperwork, as Sean has been so eloquently, and I will continue to be vulgarly descriptive, wipe your ass with the toilet paper. Because that's about what it's worth.
Right.
Now, nationalization, and you can look that up on another line item, is to express, and I'm paraphrasing what it says in the etymology dictionary, is to express oneself in a nation status. So who would that be when we're talking about pre-Columbian, pre-colonized America? John, you said this repeatedly. Do we need to get the maps out, my sister? Since it's the unwashed masses out there, it's not just black folk, so-called black folk. As she already pointed out early in this conversation, Negro, colored, mulatto, all of those things where there's two purposeful things we must be. When I was sharing with you the last time we talked about the copper penny, you might want to pull that back up from Danger. The Copper Penny documentary is extremely important, very in-depth. And it's not just about the Masonic symbolism. The things that are put on a coin is for edification and immortality. You know how many coins are being dug up in anthropological digs across the planet? How far back? How far back has coinage been used by the human existence? Do we have a real timeline?
Probably not.
And they made very clear. Well, here's the thing. I'll just point out two simple facts. The copper used in that coin is the only one of all the coins that were minted in colonial America. The only thing authorized as money in the Constitution is to mint silver and gold coinage. So when they decided to use copper, why? What was distinct? What was unique? What's different about using? And we already know what the penny and why copper is used for the symbolism of the least important financial instrument in this economic structure, correct? Who looks like copper? Who looks like copper every day? Remember them bullshit copper tone commercials with the big blonde booty being pulled down by a puppy? So that pale white alabaster, so-called chaste, virginal, Snow White ass. But they all want to be copper toned, huh? The subliminal messages, my sister, are deep and layered in this white supremacist existence. The mere fact of calling oneself white is a fraud.
Yes, It is.
Alabaster, albino, albinism, albion. All these things, anything white in existence is death. White sugar, white salt, white flour, all of which have to be bleached. What is bleaching? Is it not stripping?
It is. It's stripping.
Is it not removing the essence of a thing?
Yeah.
Indeed.
When you remove the essence of a thing, what are you doing by fact? Killing it?
You're killing it. Mm-hmm.
So when we look at these things with some level of intelligence, and hopefully when you go beyond intelligence, you go to insight. When you go beyond insight, you become discerning. When you become discerning, hopefully you're not deceived, correct?
Correct.
Now, when this brother put out in that documentary the word fugio, a Latin word fugere, some might say fugere, depending on how you pronounce it, but the basis of the word fugio was to make something disappear. What is going on daily in the United States corporation? Not in America, as Sister Sandra has pointed out. They are two different things.
Yes.
The United States corporation and the naturalization, because that is what United States citizenship is. It is, what did we just say in the first sentence of that etymology definition? To admit an alien.
Mm-hmm.
So when you become naturalized, you by definition have agreed to be alien, foreign to this land.
Yep, to the land. That is right.
And as Sean has already pointed out, accepting any document is accepting a contract, willingly or unwillingly.
Mm-hmm.
You are now a dupe. You are now deluded. And if we keep doing this amalgamation, we shall be diluted. D-I-L-U-T-E-D. But we are already delusional. D-U-L-U-D-E-L-U-S-I-O-N-A-L.
Very well said.
A form of illusion, as the sister has already said. And we already know illusion is a matrix.
Yep.
As I wrap this up, because in every time we discuss this, because you know I'm chomping at the bit when we're talking about who's on first. Maybe you need to bring that clip from Albert and Costello. Who's on first? What's on second?
Yeah.
I don't know, third base, whatever. When you folk, immigrants, Will and I, wake up and understand that you are naturalized United States citizens, alien to this land,
yes.
we got a barbecue and a cookout at the base of the Statue of Liberty, who was first a melanoid woman sent here, and they did what? Sent her ass back to France. Did they not?
Yep, because it was a gift from
in
France.
This agenda of the Fugio, they were to make disappear the wide nose, broad, the thick lips, the evidential features of the original people inhabiting this land when they came across here. So all you motherfuckers with an eye, immigrants, get ready. When we go to the base of the statue, I'm tired of your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. You're taking up my air. You're invading my land and space. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of here. And I yield.
Okay, brother. Thank you, brother. Thank you much. You were bringing it as usual. You probably going to have to come back in the queue, because what I'm about to drop here next, it's going to have you hot under the collar. And we've talked about this information before, but I like the way they put this video together. Some pieces of the video, these cats kind of showed their true color and agenda as is concerned to melanated people. So just bear with that little part on it. But this particular video is off of a YouTube channel called Truth Set Us Free Today. And it's called Slavery, America's First Imports. Now, interestingly enough, I'm glad Brother came in and talked on what he spoke on, because the deception of the whole thing about who's who on this land and who came over here for what purposes and how they got over here, etc. Everything that they have taught is a bold-faced lie, but as Grandma and them used to say, a bald-faced lie. Everything, on down to the slavery game, and I'm gonna play 2 clips from it. I'll play one, then we'll come back and chop it up. Then I'll play the next one. But the thing that was apparent to me, that I've been feeling this way for a while, and I've talked on it before, that Europe/Asia fucked up their own continent, okay? They stripped their own land of precious resources, okay? They went to the banking system, because all of that shit with banking and all of that started over there in Europe with those quote prominent families, which were back in the day ran by melanated kings and queens. They fucked that shit up, okay? Bankrupt their own stuff, and then started going out to the world colonizing, okay, backed by the Vatican. Let's get that clear, because the Vatican and those particular kingdoms were neck and neck, hand in hand, okay, to colonize across the planet, okay? So I'm going to play this video. What's that the name of the video? I got to get it again. It's going, some of you may know this information, but I like the way they broke this down. Slavery, America's First Imports, and this is off of a YouTube channel, Truth Set Us Free Today. Let me find it. I think it's the first set is 15 minutes. Where is it? I'm going to be pissed if it's not here. Because I spent a long time uploading those. While I'm looking for it, Sister, Brother Sean, did you all have anything you wanted to put on what Brother said?
I want to talk about age up. In age up, it states that indigenous women and children are not to be harmed in any way, shape, or form.
Yes.
It also states that indigenous people are not supposed to be put into the military, period, under any circumstances. And this was put into law during Obama's tenure. None of these states have enacted any of that. They know who we are, but you got stuff like Black Lives Matter. The media continually calling our people African Americans or black.
Right. And then the whole civil, and if you think about it, the Civil War, all of that, if you think about it, was integrating us into the corporate side. And one of the videos I'm going to play tonight, sorry, that first video, I have to read it because it's not any words to it. I just want to read some definitions to you. And the second video is going to get into a lot of that. They'll start to tell you what that Civil War really was about. So as Brother Sean has said, and I love it when he gets fired up, because I'm usually the one MFing and SBing every week. So laid back. Sis she doesn't use profanity, so she's, all cool with it, but she'll get fired up. But so when Brother Sean go in, I just love it. I just be sitting back. But as he was going in discussing about the paperwork, the reason he's so passionate on it, because we have made that mistake over and over again, and not so much with the paperwork back in the day, but the fact of putting our cause with other people's causes, or trying to join that corporate side and not realizing your real eyes, not understanding what you are actually doing. Okay, so that's why he's so adamant about that paperwork, and we're going to get into the Civil War stuff, and I promise you, y'all, we're going to get into the ego topic. I know this was going to go this far tonight. Okay, so the video, Slavery, America's First Import. Beg your pardon. This is off of a YouTube channel, Truth Set Us Free. It's only a 10-minute video, but it's powerful. There's no words to it. He goes into all definitions. So he starts out with the word Slavic. 1812 definition, a noun, a branch of the Indo-European language family containing Belarusian, Bulgarian, Czech, Polish, Serbo-Croatian, Slovene, Russian, and Ukraine. And then Slavic, adjective, 1813, of relating to or characteristics of the Slavs and their language. Okay, so the purpose of him showing you that was to let you know the etymology or the derivative from the word slave. Slave. Let me see. They're saying of esclave. It is, and they give different, I guess that's French, calls it slab. They call it slavist, and then slab. Okay, but the definition, the frequent enslavement of Slavs in Central Europe. A person held in servitude as the chattel of another. So I'm going to read the definition of slave. So we just went over Slavic, truly said of European. Okay, and they even start naming some of those nations. The definition of slave, the original definition, the frequent enslavement of Slavs in Central Europe, 14th century. A person held in servitude as chattel of another. Okay, so just to give you a little bit more, let me see, they had some more stuff that I wanted to talk about. So it's saying other slaves came from the ranks of the homeless and the poor when King James I held responsible for spreading the plague, and from England's swelling prison population. Okay, so those of you, I've talked about this King James stuff and King Charles stuff before. These are melanated men that sat on them thrones on those lands. Okay, so they fucked up their own land and was enslaving their own people. Okay. The scheme was supported by James I, who believed the homeless and internet rent of London were spreading plague. Of the first 300 white slaves to land in Virginia, only 12 managed to survive for 4 years. The others died of ill treatment, disease, attacked by Native Americans, or overworked. Okay, so let me see. White slaves transported to the colonies suffered a staggering loss of life in the 17th and 18th century. During the voyage to America, the white slaves were kept below deck for the entire 9 to 12-week journey. So now, that kind of sounds like the slave ship narrative that they're claiming happened to African, quote, quote, Americans. And they were only just coming from Europe over to the American shores. And they were dying in droves just from that particular transport. Okay. They were chained with 50 other men to a board with padlock collars around their neck. The weeks of confinement below deck in ship's stifling hold often resulted in outbreaks of contagious diseases, including cholera and dysentery. I don't know what that is. Ships carrying white slaves to America often lost half their slaves to death. Oh, what's it called, sis? Dysentery.
Dysentery.
Okay,
diarrhea.
Dysentery. Okay, I'm like, what the hell is that? Okay. Ships carrying white slaves to America often lost half their slaves to death. According to historian Sharon V. Salinger of the University of California, Riverside, scattered data reveals that mortality for white servants at certain times, now this is where the fuckery come into play, equaled that for black slaves in the Middle Passage, and during other periods actually exceeded the death rate for black slaves. Oh, okay then. Okay, you know they was going to have to throw in there with that part. Miss Salinger affirms a death rate of 10 to 20% over the entire 18th century for black slaves on board ship en route to America, compared with a death rate of 25% for white slaves. Foster R. Dulles in Labor in America writes that white slaves experienced discomfort and suffering on their voyage across the Atlantic that paralleled the cruel hardships undergone by Negro slaves on the notorious Middle Passage. So again, I just find it interesting that they can keep talking about this Middle Passage, but they sure wasn't fucking talking about the white slavery passage. Okay? So just keep that in mind, just to show you how everything was told truly in reverse. Dulles says that the whites were indiscriminately herded aboard the white Guiana men, often as many as 300 passengers on a little vessel of not more than 200 tons burden, overcrowded, unsanitary. Okay. Now, again, they're only just coming from Europe, so I want to know again, how can the African slaves make it from such a long voyage if they were indeed brought over the way they claim they were brought over? Okay, let me see. Okay, and they were saying that the mortality rate was sometimes, I got to back up. Right. Okay. All right. They were also saying that it was sometimes as high as 50%, and young children seldom survived the horrors of a voyage which might last anywhere from 7 to 12 weeks. Independent investigator A.P. Ellis in the Argosy writes concerning the transport of white slaves. The human cargo, many of whom were still tormented by unhealed wounds, could not lie down at once while lying on each other. They were never suffered to go on deck. The hatchway was constantly being watched by sentinel armed with hangers and blunderbusses. In the dungeons below, all was darkness, stench, disease, and death. Now again, this to me is sounding like that slave Africa Passage, slave narrative. I'm just saying. Bear with me here. Damn it. Go to another video. Bear with me here. Okay. In the past, white slavery was acknowledged as having existed in America only as indentured servitude. Such indentured servants were, for the most part, convicts who served a term of 4 to 7 years, laboring on the farms, plantations, and estates in Virginia, Georgia, Maryland, and the Carolinas in exchange for their freedom. But they represented only a small fraction of the hundreds of thousands of whites who remained slaves for life. Such slavery was hereditary. While children of the white slaves also became chattel without hope of freedom. In George Sandys' laws for Virginia, whites were enslaved forever. The service of whites bound to Berkeley's 100 was deemed perpetual. Let me see if this. Okay, so many will avoid calling the Irish slaves what they truly were, slaves. They'll come up with terms like indentured servants to describe what occurred to the Irish. However, in most cases from the 17th and 18th centuries, Irish slaves were nothing more than human cattle. As an example, they're going to throw in here that the African slave trade was just beginning during the same period. It is well recorded that African slaves not tainted with the stain of hated Catholic theology and more expensive to purchase were often treated far better than their Irish counterparts. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, but again, this little 10 minutes, they did an excellent job. The name of the video is Slavery, America's First Imports, off of the YouTube channel Truth Set Us Free Today. They did an excellent job. You'll have to stop and read it. We're going to go into the video, and they'll point this out in the next video I'm about to cue up. But just to be clear, now how does this make sense? If African slaves were much more expensive than white slaves from Europe, and they're going to get here faster from Europe than they would Africa, and they said that the African slaves were treated better than the white slaves because the African slaves were worth more money, essentially. Tell me how in the hell it was 6 to 12 million slaves that were brought to this land with no particular records. But we do, however, have records of Europeans coming over to this land. Thing that you've been told is being told in reverse. Okay? They don't want to admit that most of the people, more than likely, that are on this land today, whose lineage they can trace back to them 1700s, unless you came from nobility, boo-boo, your people were probably Slavs, serving a sentence of indentured servitude. The whole African slave narrative was switched with the white slavery narrative to take the indigenous folks off of this land. Okay, so I'll pause in case you all want to put something on it while I look for this video.
Yeah, and people are proud to sit up and take that slave history and don't want to be who they are.
Exactly.
And it's just perplexing because the information is right there.
It's
not
out
hard
there.
to find at all.
Nope.
It's in public records. It's in movies. It's in songs. It's cartoons. It's everywhere.
Yep.
But I guess people being sick. That's what I said it is. Especially the so-called master teachers who sit up and push that out of Africa theory. I mean, if their research skills was all that, then they know. But they sit up and deliberately lie.
Right.
So it just makes me wonder if in tracing their own lineage, they found out that they from the tribes that sold us out. They've been fucking sellouts all along.
Right.
So that's why they don't want to say nothing. They'd rather say that they from someplace else. So if we don't know that it's traitors right here.
Exactly.
Because we ain't get our ass kicked by quote unquote white people.
No.
It took our tribes to turn on us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because
I'm sorry. Go ahead, brother.
That's where your treaties and your land grants and land patents and all that come from. Some of our people didn't have written language or any such land grants or anything like that. So how can they have land grants for us?
Right.
Or be holding land for us?
Right.
They hold land for the federally recognized tribes. That land was being held for the $5 Indians and for the Mongolos.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And if you think about that, when they were saying that the Slavs were coming over here as indentured servants around that 1700 time, that's when we were still warring.
Exactly.
Our ancestors was still warring, like, get the fuck up off our land. But then on the other hand, like Brother Sean is saying, you had some of the other tribes that was cutting motherfucking deals with them. Okay? So that's what was really going down that folks don't want to talk about, and they want to sell you this out of Africa narrative. And I tell them, especially folks that want to be argumentative about my motherfucking lineage, which is none of their goddamn business. I don't have to prove shit to you. Nigga, you prove to me what part of Africa you from. Let's work on that, because I can prove my stuff. Now you prove to me what part of Africa you on, and show me the fucking ship that dropped your folks off. It should be a ship manifest.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's all of the mind games that have been played to take you off of your heritage, the land. That's the physical part of it. The spiritual side of it is when you're connected to your land that goes back thousands and thousands, if not millions of years, there is a powerful spiritual component to it. And that's why this land has never been at peace since invaders have stepped on it, and since some of the folks that were or are a part of the land cut fucking deals. So it was spiritually out of balance then. So very good point. So the next video is Forgotten White Slaves, Irish, Scots, poor Englishmen ended up as slaves in America. So this is from a YouTube channel called Arlene Purcell. Now, I don't know if this one clip I'm about to play is about 10 minutes. They kind of going to piss you off a little bit. Two of the Caucasian gentlemen showing their racism side a little bit. But if you could get past that little snippet they tried to throw in, the jabs, they're really throwing out some good stuff here. So here we go. Forgotten white slaves. This is about 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back and chop it up.
At the same time, because of the precedent for impressment, in other words, conking a white farmer or laborer, or generally the poor and working class of Great Britain, over the head, or otherwise abducting them onto ships, and this is an old precedent in Great Britain, out of that came the kidnapping of whites. And so there was very little to distinguish the two forms of servitude until we came into the politically correct era, which I would say really began in the Victorian age, when the British attempted to have bragging rights for their alleged emancipation of slaves, but that was limited entirely to black slaves. And since they had instituted it, it was not the United States of America, but rather Great Britain and the Crown that had instituted, then I don't really see how they do have those bragging rights. And as we talk later on in the broadcast, the horrors that were being visited on white people at the same time that there was this boasting about the liberality of the British Crown and the British Empire is really disgusting, in my view.
Very interesting. We've never heard about this before, but what was the divide here then? I mean, as we said, this is an ancient institution. It wasn't. I mean, today we have a view that, it was done on. It seems like we're dividing everything on racial lines today because it's within the context of what is the moral issues of the day kind of thing. But how did people become enslaved, and what was the criteria for this, and how could they get away with it? If we look at, let's say, Great Britain primarily, who of course were. It goes further back than that, I know that, but we have a lot of issues of, for example, the enclosure movement and things like that actually drove people off the land, putting them in a position which we've, I think, never even seen before, it seems like, where they no longer could take care of themselves. They indeed became dependent upon society, and you got these massive, poor people basically roaming around in the cities and whatnot. I don't know if I'm jumping way ahead of myself there, Michael, but how did people become enslaved?
Well, the idea that Great Britain had a dark age, when people refer to the medieval period as the Dark Ages, I really think that that's a sign of indoctrination, because there was so much that was good about the medieval period that has been lost to us. And part of that is the concept of the yeoman in Anglo-Saxon England, which was carried over under the Normans to a certain extent. And that is that the poor man, or the man who was the worker, the farmer, the shepherd, had tremendous value in and of himself. After all, we were talking about the Vikings, but it was under King Alfred the Great, relying on this yeomanry, that was finally able to fight the Vikings to a standstill and then work out a peace with them. And Alfred was very aware of how much he needed the English working class to assist him in that regard. So they're really responsible for the freedom that Anglo-Saxon England was able to win. And as a part of that, and as well as the dignity which Christianity had conferred on the individual, you had people in the Middle Ages who talked of the fact that they had good wool clothing, they had good beer and good cheese and good bread. And part of that came from the fact that you had the policy of the commons. And the commons was a certain amount of land that was left open for grazing purposes for anyone who had a small holding. They might have a half an acre, they might have a cow, they might have some other horse that needed grazing. And so on these commons, the peasants could gather together, their cow could get the grass, and they could live at least a minimum standard of decency in their lives. And, in the American West, it's often rhapsodized about the closing of the American West when they fenced in the West. And so the commons was even part and parcel of the legend of the American West in terms of how we have romanticized it. When the barbed wire was put up and the cattle were no longer free to roam, many Americans lamented that as a closing of a great epic in our country. But again, we're ignorant of the fact that there was this concept of the commons in Great Britain. And as capitalism arose as an institution, I'm not talking here about free enterprise, which existed in medieval England, but I'm talking about rapacious capitalism, predatory capitalism. These commons were then seized, and part of the precedent was Henry VIII's seizure of the monasteries. The monasteries, I'm sure there were corrupt monks, I'm sure there were abuses of every kind, but at the same time, the monasteries were part of the engine of Anglo-Saxon freedom. They pioneered hospitals, they pioneered scientific experimentation with plants and chemicals, and they served as a redoubt when the people were under attack, and of course as a spiritual beacon to people. And Henry VIII, in his greed, wanting to secure for himself a firm purchase over the people of Great Britain and in his government, he seized those monasteries and then distributed their vast wealth among his barons, who you could say in some respects were really little more than gangsters. And that precedent, which was really a revolutionary, illegal move, I believe then led to the further tyranny, which we saw emerging with Elizabeth I. There had been some enclosures prior to her, but with Elizabeth I, we saw a very radical move against the commons, and that's where we saw the emergence of a pauper class. Now these people no longer could have access to the commons for their livestock, and they were eventually impoverished. And typically when rural people are impoverished, where do they go? They go to the great cities like London, where they became the prostitutes, the pickpockets, and what was regarded as a criminal underclass. And this word criminal, which is really just a euphemism for poor whites who had been oppressed in this regard, is used over and over again in the annals of white slavery to justify what would happen in the coming centuries. So that's a brief survey of how we see the artificial creation of a poverty-stricken class, which was denigrated institutionally, looked on as sort of a species of subhuman, and from there you could begin the abduction process, which would become the main belt of transmission for slavery into 17th and 18th century America.
Very good. Now, so this, in effect, to a certain degree, was not only the creation of a poor class, it was the beginning of a war on them, the pauper class, as you say. But this is, of course, how many Irish, Scots, poor Englishmen ended up in the American colonies, even down to areas like Barbados. I believe even, we can talk about that later, but Australia and New Zealand as well to a certain degree. But in my view, as I was reading the book, this was a measure to try to get rid of them. And so the question here is, of course, okay, with the creation of this class, was this an unintended side effect, or was this something that was sought to be achieved so that they indeed could kind of colonize their colonies, for lack of a better term?
Well, I think it was unintended, because there's an old saying by some British general. He was asked whether or not his English troops would terrify the enemy, and he said, I don't know, but by God, they terrify me. I mean, there you have a very sturdy stock of people there among the Anglo-Saxon and later peoples of England, and they represented a revolutionary potential. You didn't have a true revolution against the monarchy until the 17th century with the rise of the Puritan Republic, which cut off the head of Charles I. But you had that potential ever since the enclosures and the institutional impoverishment of these English people, who were also reproducing at a high rate. It's not like today where people have one or two children and think that's a big family. Completed family size might be 8 or 10, but the typical person would have 15 or 20 if they could survive childbirth. And then, so no, this was an enormous potential for revolution. That's what they feared. They saw it as a population explosion, and they had to do a sweep. They had to sweep these people off the streets, onto the ships, and out of there. And I think if they had not done that, then some type of personality, another Alfred the Great or Robin Hood or Braveheart type of personality could have come up and organized those people the English in this era had an affinity for aristocracy. And I don't say that aristocracy is wrong in all cases, even though I'm a traditional American and therefore I favor republic. But I believe an aristocracy should be an aristocracy of merit. It should be a natural aristocracy and not this kind of vampiric aristocracy, which to this day survives in Great Britain and works against the interests of the English people, even though they've been manipulated. And some of the best conservative forces in Great Britain continue to support the monarchy because of the ways in which they've been manipulated by a very brilliant British Secret Service over there, no doubt about that.
Yep, definitely. I definitely agree. A natural aristocracy. I believe there is such a thing. But so just to clarify this point again here, the aristocratic class and the merchants who had the infrastructure in place and the ability to perform these transpositions of people, etc. It's not an idea of where they go out and look for people who have a different skin color and consequently take as many of those as they can and put them in these colonies to work the fields, etc. It's a very different kind of scenario that arises from learning this kind of knowledge here. But so, what are we talking about in terms of numbers, Michael? Do we have any idea here in terms of how many people were taken from the British Isles and ended up in the Americas and in other parts of the world?
That's very difficult to say. I can give an estimate for the number of people from, say, 1688 until when oppressment ended toward the end of the 19th century in terms of abducting people on board ships. That's about 50% of all the men who served on board those ships, because some records are kept. And so it's about 500,000 sailors, so about 250,000 were abducted. It's much more difficult in this case because and what we're referring to in terms of the peopling of British America with white slaves, because it was an enormous embarrassment to the white aristocracy and ruling class that this was even happening. And that's why it's been so difficult to research this and get to the bottom of it. It's heavily covered up, especially in terms of euphemisms. For example, the prime euphemism of indentured servitude, when it was actually, it could be in slavery for life, particularly in the 17th century. What I would say is that we are looking at numbers as high as 100,000 at the very least, and tens of thousands more once the dumping ground of British America ended with the success of the American Revolution. Then the tyrants had to turn to Australia. There are better records for that. That's more disputed, and it's not my specialty like this area is, but I would certainly say that many tens of thousands of whites were enslaved in Australia as well. So we're talking about very high figures for the time, 100,000 or more at least, but it's very difficult to say, and I'm loath to give a figure because the records are poor. I've had some genealogists come forward. They use my book as a handbook to trace their forefathers in America. They've given me some information, but I would be reluctant to really put a figure on it. But I would say it's massive in comparison with the number of people. Certainly, I really feel that you've got at least 1/3 of the people of 17th and 18th century British America having an unfree background. And also, we have to realize that this changes with each century. In the 17th century, this was a very intense phenomenon because the whites were the first slaves into America, and this is admitted by some of the more objective historians, and that's in my book. And then in the 18th century, as black enslavement came more to the fore, there was an attempt to enslave American Indians. That was largely a failure. They were constantly trying to escape and resist. And then by the 19th century, you could say that indentured servitude actually did have meaning and integrity. For example, Johnson, Lincoln's vice president, was an indentured servant in North Carolina, and there was a reward put out for him when he ran away. Now, he actually was serving, Andrew Johnson actually was serving as an indentured servant. He was whipped by the white ruling class who were slaveholders, and it's one of the reasons why people like Johnson became what was known as the border white constituency, which was critical to the success of Lincoln in fighting the South. These were poor whites who were mad as hell at the black slavery in the South because it delegitimized white labor. White labor trying to compete against slave labor is almost always going to lose. Yeah. And in fact, and I know I digress here, but just very briefly, another constituency for Lincoln was David Wilmot's Free Soil Party. Many of the men motivated to fight in the American Civil War did so for white separatist, or one could even say white supremacist reasons. And part of that was the concept that if the Confederacy succeeded and black slavery remained intact in the South, that it would expand into places like Oregon, California, and Idaho, where whites crowded into the eastern seaboard cities really saw that as a place to be able to be free and pursue their dreams there without having to compete with slave labor. So these are things policed out of this ridiculously two-dimensional portrait.
Okay, family. So that was from Forgotten White Slaves, Irish, Scots, Poor Englishmen Ended Up as Slaves in America, off of the YouTube channel Arlene Purcell. So I'll pause in case sis or Brother Sean, you want to put something on it before I give my 2 cents.
Oh, yeah. Alrighty then. So-called white people, this being truth uncompromised, we're not prejudiced, but y'all been lied to too.
Yep.
For us for who you are, what you're entitled to.
Yep.
All of that. Y'all sit up and look at us like we're lost people, but at least we're allegedly lost at home. Now,
true.
Think about that.
Very true.
You don't belong here. You have no rights, because there is no right in fraud. It's all wrong.
Yep.
So anything and everything that you do here is all wrong. Period.
Yep.
You shouldn't be here.
Well,
go ahead.
Brother, you finished?
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay. All I think I was thinking of is that hole in Russia. When you start mentioning all of them Slavics and all that kind of stuff in Russia, a hole in a mountainside that they say that came out of the ground. About Albion, they came up out of the ground, and obviously there's old maps. You talked about it that show that they lived underground. So all these people were multiplying underground. From what I was thinking as I was listening to this, and when they came out, they had nowhere to go, no clothes, no nothing, and so they were at the mercy of those who were on this surface already. So that's what I was thinking of, and they were pressed into servitude and, treated like animals. Because there's a video that on TV, on the YouTube, that says it's called the call it domesticating of the human. So they were not considered man, but human. There was space in between that. So that's a species of creature or entity that the melanated Moors trained and taught. So then here we go, the tide was turned, and they took down the Moorish mobility of Europe.
They took them down. Absolutely.
They took them down. And then they set themselves up as the originals because they had no identity prior to that except for what they were able to emulate or copy.
Right, because
so I
think you're right on point, sis. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, I mean, it said that the Moors, went around, quote, civilizing,
right.
and that whole Caucasian race, so out of the Caucasus Mountains, but the older maps showed over in Africa a lot of stuff was going on there, and it shows that some folks, and they had white skin, were living underground. Okay, so it could be a combination of that, being Africa being the oldest, and then some were in the Caucasus Mountains. But either way, the Moors are responsible for, quote, civilizing them. Okay, so the Moors sat on those thrones, let's be clear. And the Moors ran their own, and we're talking the nobility, the Moorish nobility, or the black nobility, same thing, ran their own economies and civilizations in the ground. So I'm saying that at the time that folks were being, the Slavs, aka white folks, were being shipped over here for slavery, that was black nobility that sat on them thrones in the 1700s and all that. We know that because you can go out there and you can get pictures on it.
Until 1820. Until 1820. There was the last coin that was drafted. They were black nobility was in power, and they were black popes. They were black papacy. Melanated. Excuse me. Don't say no black.
Same thing. Yeah.
Melanated, and were not these white folks or Albions they have up there now. So they did this to themselves, and they did it to the world.
Exactly. And so you can even go back and look at the land deeds, land patents, charters, and you can see where the same melanated nobility fucking issued those things out. Okay, so these are the truths that are now coming out. So the Slavs, or quote white folks on this nation, who they really should be upset with is the motherfucking crown.
Right.
The crown and the Vatican. That's who owes you something.
And George Washington
you away from your land.
George Washington was one of them. He was a criminal.
Yeah, he broke out of jail. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that whole Australian landmass, that's very well documented. That it was all their criminals from Europe. And they moved the indigenous folks off of their land. So the same thing that happened over in Australia, with the only difference with over here, they were putting them literally into slavery on the America's lands. And the mainland, meaning those of us that live in the States, and as well as what we're calling the Caribbean, okay, they were also shipping them there as well. Okay, so these are the true things that went on at this time. So during that 1700 time period, I'm going to state again, the indigenous people were at war. We weren't coming off of no slave ships from Africa in droves. They couldn't fucking afford to buy millions worth of African slaves.
They didn't have ships
That's
either.
why they imported the European slaves or the Slavs. The indigenous people were at war. And as we were defeated, we became prisoners of war through work. How the fuck do you think Slavs knew how to farm this goddamn land? Somebody had to teach them. You got to be from this land to know how to plant the corn, plant the collard greens, plant the indigenous plants of this fucking land. So you mean to tell me the Africans came over here and showed them how to do that shit? It couldn't have been. They're lying. You have to start using discernment and putting the story together. It's there. They left the fucking evidence there. But because people have been so asleep and have allowed the colonizers, your captors, as you are prisoners of war, and for the Caucasian people, as you were held as Slavs, you have allowed them to educate you, miseducate you. When the records are there. So I'm going to pause in case Brother Sean or Sis, you want to put anything else on it. Otherwise, we're going to go to part 2 of that video, and then we're going to move on.
I'm good.
Okay. All righty. So here we go with part 2.
Thought form that they had created over time. Now, all of us would like to believe that we were in the law of one, and I'm sure we were. But what you'll find in the Casey readings oftentimes are people who were in.
Okay, that was straight fuckery. That is not the one. So hold on a second. Let me see if I could pull this again. Hopefully my part 2 just didn't go. All right. Seems like it just
an indentured servant in North Carolina, and there was a reward put out for him when he ran away. Now, he actually was serving, Andrew Johnson actually was serving as an indentured servant. He was whipped by the white ruling class who were slaveholders. Stated, you are the slave race. You are the main race that was captured and seized and exploited in this manner. And therefore, subconsciously and psychologically, the person who's told that has to feel that they have a genetic defect inside of them. And that is not the case. Some of that comes from Talmudic and Judaic sources as well, which was an inspiration in some cases for white slavers to identify the black race with Ham or one of the descendants of Noah in the famous section there. But anyway, yes, they are being exploited in this way, and they're being given this sense of entitlement. And that's not what you want to do to advance the people. And here in the United States, we're watching as Asian immigrants are pouring into the country, learning the language very quickly, going to university, occupying the higher echelons in the United States, and black people continue to be left behind. I refuse to believe it's because they can't do it, but I believe that the Asians are not saddled with this entire plethora of psychologically crippling material that has been imposed on blacks, and the idea that if we can let them understand that white people also suffered horribly, were also betrayed by their own people, I think that benefits everybody. And you know what? The truth always benefits everyone. So whether or not we can say that it has a nice outcome, my goal is to radically pursue the truth wherever it leads, whatever toes it steps on. But I think in this case, it leads to a good outcome.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, historical accuracy, that is the number one priority here, to cover up, to make people feel better, even if it's done for the fact of they think that this is, for the welfare of people. I think it's not, that the lies is going to harm more people, and I think it's better to just be brutally honest about it and let's face the reality for what it is. But it's also, of course, about the creation of a victim class, a victim mentality, which is a very another powerful tool. But let's just talk for a moment about how many of the Africans, actually, how they ended up in the American colonies and what you know. I don't know if you're a specialist on this per se, but we know, of course, with the tie-in with the Arab slave trade, there were Jewish merchants who were part of this process as well. It wasn't like you have a situation where people went out in the African bush, white people, threw a net over a couple of people and hauled them off to the ships and sailed them over to the Americas or Barbados or Bahamas or what have you. This was a very established merchant network that was very in some cases, of course, he had other black tribes fighting with each other, and they in some cases captured their enemy and sold them to the Arabs, and then some of the Jews owned some of the merchant ships, etc. It's a very it's a much more complicated view than the very simplified, myopic one we're getting in today in the media, correct?
Yes, and I'd like to add here, again, trying to have some fidelity for the truth, that I see very little Judaic role in white enslavement. I just wanted to make that point.
Mm-hmm.
I was surprised by that fact. It was mainly whites selling their own whites. Yes, I refer people to one of the best historians for black enslavement is Eugene Genovese, and he also partnered with his wife. He wrote 6 or 8 books. Roll, Jordan, Roll is probably the prime one that I recommend for people. He started out as a Marxist, was professor of history at the University of Rochester in upstate New York, had a rather interesting peregrination as a scholar, continually reacting to new information, which is really the revisionist mandate, and then changing his views as he got better and better information until he finally developed toward the end into quite a sympathizer for our point of view. So I recommend that as a fundamental text. Almost any of the books of Genovese, and he was so honest that even when he was a Marxist, he released anomalous information that I was able to use a little bit in my book, especially about the 19th century era. But certainly we see even today in Africa, Keith Richburg wrote a book. He was a reporter for the Washington Post about a decade or so ago. Out of Africa, he called it. He was based in Africa, and he said, he made the incredible statement that if my ancestors had not been captured and sold into black slavery in America, I would have been one of the bloated bodies that I saw washing over the waterfall, whether it was Victoria Falls, I can't recall, in Africa. In other words, the fratricide and tribal warfare continues in those areas, and undoubtedly the media is covering up the extent to which the type of slavery, when I give talks at colleges and I talk about white slavery, they think I'm talking about sexual trafficking because that's pretty much all they're familiar with.
Yeah.
But certainly in terms of black women and children being sexually trafficked into a type of sexual slavery, but also chattel slavery itself is still present in Africa. It just isn't being covered by the media. So in 300 years, we have not seen a lot of changes in Africa because of this, both the religious divide, the sectarian divide between Muslims and Christians, but the even more severe divide, which is tribal. And I wouldn't know how many hundreds or thousands of tribes there are in Africa, many of them existing in mutual hatred, murderous hatred for one another. But this was certainly what obtained in the 17th century, and they were more than willing to take what they regarded as a subhuman member of another tribe and sell them en masse. And in the Amistad case in the 19th century, where a supposedly white supremacist U.S. Supreme Court, with only one dissenting vote, Spielberg did a movie about it. And
yeah.
So if you fast forward through the sadomasochistic scenes that he seems to delight in, actually it's a feather in the cap of white people, because people like John Quincy Adams, who was a great opponent of the Freemasons in America, very little is said about that, even in a new biography of him, it's skipped over. But he was the one who argued on behalf of the blacks who had been taken by Spanish slavers. And so even 8 out of the 9 members of the Supreme Court, allegedly white supremacists in this era, this antebellum era of America, voted in favor of those black slaves because they felt that the Spanish holders, and it's one of the reasons why people like Johnson became what was known as the border white constituency, which was critical to the success of Lincoln in fighting the South. These were poor whites who were mad as hell at the black slavery in the South because it delegitimized white labor. White labor trying to compete against slave labor is almost always going to lose. Yeah. And in fact, and I know I digress here, but just very briefly, another constituency for Lincoln was David Wilmot's Free Soil Party. Many of the men motivated to fight in the American Civil War did so for white separatist, or one could even say white supremacist reasons. And part of that was the concept that if the Confederacy succeeded and black slavery remained intact in the South, that it would expand into places like Oregon, California, and Idaho, where whites crowded into the eastern seaboard cities really saw that as a place to be able to be free and pursue their dreams there without having to compete with slave labor. So these are things policed out of this ridiculously two-dimensional portrait of the American war between the states. But as I say, I digress.
All right. Now, what about the term indentured servants then? We often hear that, it was not as bad as it was for the blacks and all that, right? When I began looking into this, it seems like there was a different, value put on different people for different reasons in terms of what conditions they could work under. For example, if they had a time period on their head that, okay, you are to work for, 5 years or 7 years or whatnot as an indentured servant, they were worked in some cases even harder due to this fact, and many of them did not make it out alive, and those were the type of conditions. I feel that this has been heavily marginalized to a certain degree to kind of brush it over and say, it wasn't so bad for those who were whites. Any comments on that, Michael?
Well, how many came over as indentured servants to begin with? How many came over with a contract? That would be one question. And how many came over with no contract at all because they were stolen off the streets of Glasgow and London and all the major port cities in Great Britain at that time? Secondly, even for those who had indentures, oftentimes it wasn't worth the paper that it was written on. These people needed you for more labor, and so they would find a way to extend your indentures. One of the punishments for being disobedient, one of the punishments for not showing up for work, one of the punishments for running away would be an extension of your indentures. So some of the people who were sent over on a contract of 7 years, for example, the biblical figure of 7 years, actually served for 10, 15, 20 years, and that could be a lifetime because of the grueling, brutal conditions under which they served. So if you were 30 years old and you went over there on a 7-year contract, but you ended up being enslaved for 20 because they kept adding time on as a punitive measure, you could easily die as a slave. And when I looked at the diaries and letters and other primary research that were sent either home to survivors in Great Britain or that we found extant in North America, we see that in many, many cases that the indentured servitude concept, especially in the 17th century, was virtually worthless. The vast majority of these people were exploited and enslaved. And what the propaganda sees on is the individual that was lucky enough, the very rare individual to be taken into the plantation house. Maybe they were extremely literate and they did some writing for the master, they did the accounting books, and then at the end of 5 or 7 years, they themselves became wealthy or became a judge. But that's a story that has been overworked in this epic, and the actual reality is very different from that minority story that has become the overwhelming false narrative for indentured servitude.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, this history, and highly kept out of the history books. I mean, and a kind of a follow-on from this as well then, as we go deeper into this. I think I heard you elsewhere. It was actually a great interview done by the brave Ernst Zundel. He was interviewing you many years ago. It's available on YouTube, by the way. A great interview there about this topic as well. And you mentioned that you bring the good news to black people as well, that they are not merely just a slave race, as it's kind of to a certain degree being portrayed today in the media of today. This is something that occurred to every other race. It's also, of course, a good news to white people that they are not solely responsible and more guilty because of this for any other reasons. How do you view race relations and what has occurred here, and how the historical cover-up has played a big role in this?
Well, blacks are heavily targeted. They're just as much targeted as whites are, but in a very different way. First of all, with being complimented all the time, and by being told how wonderful you are. You know, for those of us who are parents, and I'm a parent, when I'm raising my children, I'm not always telling them that everything they do is perfect and good. Naturally, I want to be constructive and positive, but I'm telling them also, I'm reminding them of, look at the person that is ahead of you. And don't be saddled with the concept that I can't get ahead of because of unfair circumstances which have been imposed on me. Any parent who allows their child, to the extent that we have control over our children, to adopt such a crippling philosophy, that child is probably not going to be a success in life. And so what is being imposed on black people is something very similar to that they have a set of disabilities from which they're not going to be able to overcome until they're paid reparations or whatever the case may be, whatever the solution is said to be. And also, for example, in the area of education, black education in America is substandard, even in places like Oakland, California, where black supremacists or black power people are running the educational system because they're imposing ebonics on black people. In other words, improper grammar, and actually saying that that's the best way to speak. The schools for black people should be teaching Shakespeare, Latin, Greek, calculus, and emphasizing discipline. Anyone who truly loved them would do that. And at the same time, they are under, as you say, as you brought up, and I'm glad that you brought that point up, they bear this onerous burden, and it's more psychological and sub rosa than actually. At the same time, because of the precedent for impressment, in other words, conking a white farmer or laborer or generally the poor and working class of Great Britain over the head, or otherwise abducting them onto ships, and this is an old precedent in Great Britain, out of that came the kidnapping of whites. And so there was very little to distinguish the two forms of servitude until we came into the politically correct era, which I would say really began in the Victorian age, when the British attempted to have bragging rights for their alleged emancipation of slaves, but that was limited entirely to black slaves. And since they had instituted it, it was not the United States of America, but rather Great Britain and the Crown that had instituted, then I don't really see how they do have those bragging rights. And as we talk later on in the broadcast, the horrors that were being visited on white people at the same time that there was this boasting about the liberality of the British Crown and the British Empire is really disgusting, in my view.
Very interesting. We've never.
Okay. Again, he kind of pissed me off a little bit in that, but I kept playing it to get the point about the psyche of the melanated people that's being played on today in regards to slavery. But again, the name of that video, I think it's a little bit over an hour, if I'm not mistaken. It's called Forgotten White Slaves, Irish, Scots, Poor Englishmen Ended Up as Slaves in America, and that's off the YouTube channel Arlene Purcell, Purcell. Before I forget, Brother Sean, you had someone in the chat room, God Thompson 42, said that right, Brother Sean, our so-called black leaders that followed Dr. King also knew the truth and have been hiding this information for decades. And they also say they will be outed very soon. So shout out to God Thompson 42 in the chat room. So I did want to share that with you, Brother Sean. Okay, so before I put something on it, sis or Brother Sean, you have anything you want to add to it? And anyone want to join the conversation, just press *1 to get in the queue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I like on the first part where he said Indians didn't make good slang.
Yep.
But to me, it seems like, rightfully so, they should claim their history. But y'all white, y'all free. Why not go back home and use your law and all your research and all this, that, and the other, and fight for some compensation over there.
Right, because they are owed some. They are the crown owes them compensation. Absolutely, they do.
Oh yeah, but that's over there.
Over there. The crown over
right.
in England. Yes.
This guy, he done all this research, this, that, and the other, but he's still sitting up calling us black. And all around the Indian thing, and just jumped right on the black train. And
he was dancing around that whole Indian, African, and black thing. He was dancing around, so that lets me know he know the truth. But he's not gonna be all the way truthful.
Yeah, just like
he ain't supposed to be.
True that, brother. True that. His responsibility is to tell the Slavs, and I've said this before, it's not the Caucasians /Slavs/white people responsibility to tell us who we are. So it was his responsibility to get that information out to his people on knowing who the fuck they are, to go back and claim what is rightfully theirs. But it's not over here. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about that plantation stuff he was saying. You know, we're the ones who built all those things, and we were the ones who were living in them. When they came over here and called themselves freeing the slaves, they were freeing white folks from slavery. They were not freeing melanated people from slavery, because they're the ones who had the slaves. So when he said that they were on the plantation and they owned slaves and all that kind of black melanated slaves, that's not true. They turned that around, because when Great Britain came over here to fight to free the slaves, they were fighting to free the white men, because they're the ones that were enslaved by us. So
actually, it's a little different. Actually, what happened was the white folks on this particular land, or the Slavs,
had taken over,
all in an uproar to get from up under the crown's oppression.
Right.
So that's what that was about. So that war was freeing both the white quote Slavs, as well as the prisoners of war, our ancestors. And they even documented that, because they were trying to bring their people up. So in other words, they had already they had started taking control by then, because we were being defeated in war. And then whoever they were cutting them side deals with in the other indigenous Indian nations, they overthrew their monkey asses. So they were setting up their corporation on this land, and part of that was to bring up their people, the Slavs. So that's what the problem was, because you had the southern folks in the southern states getting rich off of the Slav labor and the prisoners of war, and then this new nation the Slavs were building, aka founding fathers, they also wanted their folks free to take advantage of all of this rich land. And if slavery continued, their folks would never be able to make a living. So that's really what that Civil War was about. It was the final nail, quote, quote, in the coffin of the indigenous people having control over the land. That's what it was about. because up from the 1500s all the way up to like the 1800s, we were at war. But they established that corporation in 1773. They started setting shit up. That's when the Slavs started taking over things. And even with that said, they still had help even setting that particular corporation up, because they didn't fucking know how to do it. So they had help from the melanated side. Now, some say that that help came from melanated people that were beholden to the crown, because you got to remember, the folks that sat on the crown were melanated. So when they came over here fucking with us, they sent other melanated people that were in their court of nobility over here to start setting shit up, cutting deals with some of our traitor indigenous brothers and sisters. So I say it was those same nobility as the Slavs started taking control. They fucking showed them how to set up the corporation and how to run it. Because you can't come from no fucking slave and come from poverty to know how to set up and run a corporation. You had to be taught that. That's what the whole dynamics of the Civil War was about, and that they don't want to talk about it because that makes the Crown and the Vatican responsible for the Slavs. They owe them reparations. The Slavs are owed reparations in land and their indigenous nations. That's why this shit is being reversed and to knock us off the land. So I'll yield in case somebody else want to put something on it.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brother
Come to
Sean.
think of it, sis, they can't be indigenous nowhere. They not melanated.
Well, I can't work that out for them. All I know is they was kidnapped off of where the fuck they was documented as being. So exactly. I'm trying to help them out. Them motherfuckers owe y'all reparations. I'm telling you that. And sorry, if you're in the chat room, you literally have less than 2 minutes to join us. If you want to continue to join us, we're going into overtime. Dial 929-477-3858. 929-477-3858. We're going into overtime. So yeah, either way it goes, either the continent of Asia, which Europe is still a part of that, or parts of Africa, which that blows people's mind too. But they are owed reparations, because they are indigenous from somewhere. It's not here, we do know that. I'm leaning more towards the Europe and the Asia route, because they kidnapped them and brought them over here and put them into slavery. So the motherfucking crown owes them. The crown up to the Vatican owes them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why everything's being switched. They done came up with this elaborate motherfucking story that, you know, folks came through Statue of Liberty, this, that, and the third, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, yeah, they came through okay, but not the way they said that they came. Okay, so now that's what needs to be discussed. And it's going to come out. It's going to come out because as folks are still pushing, that's why Caucasian, you be careful what the fuck you ask for. You talking about the Mexicans need to get the fuck on. That's what's going to bring up the whole total truth conversation. Because you can't tell one set of folks you not from here. God damn it, you ain't from here. So that's going to force the conversation to tell the truth on what was done to them and who did it to them and what is owed to them.
Who's contra now? Who's contra now, white boy? Who's contra now?
Yeah. So just to show you the amount of spell that was cast on these entire lands, where the roles were definitely switched. So you got melanated people walking around here thinking they're descendants from fucking slaves and talking about going back over to Africa, and African nations have not stepped up yet. Come over here and get your monkey ass, or raise no stink over coming to get you and making those nations pay you for what was done to you. And then you have the Slavs or Caucasians, they know that they're not from here, but not entering understanding that they were the ones that were the fucking slaves. Now, not to say that African slaves did not exist. They did. And once again, when you check the records, they tell you who's African. The records tell you whether it was an African slave or just an African that was over here. They tell you that because they had to tell you back in the day when that slavery shit was going on, because they had to pay tax on that. They had to pay tax on that property. Okay, so just do a little research on that. It's a lot of pictures out there showing where the Slavs were like hand in hand with melanated folks in quote slavery. It shows a lot of pictures in Louisiana, and it shows a lot of pictures in that in the southern states, particularly the Carolinas, which would make perfect sense, especially with them Carolinas, as that battle was very, very heavy with the indigenous people, our ancestors, not going along with the fuckery. Okay. All right, family. I know that took a lot longer, but it unfolded the way it needed to unfold. Okay, so now we're going to get into the main topic tonight, discussing the ego. And there was a method to my madness in bringing up the follow-up and also the ego topic for tonight. All right, so ego, and I'm pulling this out of the etymology dictionary, the online etymology dictionary. You can look this up yourself. Etymololine.com, ETYMONLINE.com. That's an excellent source. You can put in any word, and it'll give you the origins. Okay, so ego from a noun. By 1707, in metaphysics, the self, that which feels, acts, or thinks, from Latin, ego. Its use is implied in egotizing. They have pleaded against propriety and would have all things common in this world, have forgotten that there is a propriety in our present egotizing and natural constitution, which rendereth some accidental propriety necessary to us. It says the practical works of the late Reverend and pious Mr. Richard Baxter, London of 1707. The Freudian definition from 1894 is a sense of conceit. And then by the 1969 was the first coined the term ego trip. And they're saying that's related to ego call. All right. So it says in the book of egoism, it is written, possession without obligation to the object possessed approaches velocity. And that was back in the 1879. Okay, so I went through those iterations of the word ego, the noun, to just show you how it evolved over time. But the original documented meaning of it was a metaphysics meaning. Ego meaning the self, that which feels, acts, or think. And it is Latin in origin. Okay, so then I went to, so if ego originally meant self from a metaphysics standpoint, let me look at these other variations of the word ego. And that's when it came with egotized verb, which talk over much of oneself. So that definition comes from 1775. So I'm pointing this out because as we talked about the spell of language, we have to start decoding this bastardized English language to enter and understand how things derive the way they do. So hopefully now when you think of ego, you would think of the original word derived from Latin, means from a metaphysics standpoint, it means the self, feels, acts, or think, versus the definition that folks typically think today, which started in 1969, ego trip. Really what you're looking for is egotize, which is a verb, an action, and it's talk over much of oneself, okay? All right, so those are the differences between the two. Ooh, excuse me, family. All right. The differences between your soul and your ego. This is off of a website called ElyseSantilli.com. ElyseSantilli.com. One of my biggest transformational moments in life was realizing the difference between my soul and my ego. It took me a long time, a lot of soul digging to get it. Here is my understanding. Your ego is the image you have of yourself, your social mask, the face you put on for the world, your titles and roles, girlfriend, daughter, brother, sister, friend, colleague, teammate. You can learn to spot your ego when your ego is in charge. You're often caught in circling thoughts, thinking about the same thing over and over. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. You're often consumed by your emotions, especially hurt and disappointed and angry. Your inner dialogue is heavily focused on anxiety, fears, doubts, self-criticism, I'm not good enough. I'm not beautiful. I can't do this. I totally messed up. I am bad at this. My life is meaningless. Your worth is dependent on external things, whether you've got a partner, a mortgage, a great job, a beautiful wardrobe, a huge circle of friends, etc., etc. You desperately need validation from other people. You're easily bruised when things don't go your way. People don't act in the way you expect them to. People let you down, or people say or do things that offend you. Your ego is something you have to live with, but you don't have to listen to it or believe what it has to say. Try not to take it too seriously. It's not the real you. Okay, so I'm going to try to clean that up a little bit. And just so you know, I had a really, really hard time finding clear-cut material. So that just lets you know that folks are still not really clear what is when you're stuck in an unbalance of being egotizing, overthinking yourself, or putting yourself in a situation where you're looking externally for things to make you whole. WHOLE. Okay, so we're going to go back to, again, balancing those chakras. Okay, specifically where that comes out of the heart chakra. Okay, when you have an egotized issue where you need validation from other folks, or you are putting your particular demands, your particular ideology on other folks, that is an unbalance of your heart chakra. You are looking for external things to make you whole. Now, specifically, this has been on my mind because time and time again, Brother Sean and I kind of talked about this, offline. We see folk come into what they're calling conscious community, which has turned into a joke because the behavior is unconscious, is what we're seeing. And you can almost see a script unfold, meaning that you will see someone come on the conscious community scene as bringing fresh ideas, they're bringing great information, etc., etc., etc. Then next thing you know, there is some type of controversy that's setting in, okay? And a lot of that controversy is because the conscious community is not a lot of it, all of that controversy is because the conscious community is not operating out of a spiritual, balanced place. It's driven by egotized, okay, where these particular folks that are self-titling themselves as master teacher this, or king of Pan-African that, all giving themselves titles, is operating out of ego. And what we're seeing in the unconscious community are these particular folks that are putting themselves on this pedestal, or allowing others to put them on the pedestal to play this role, because that's what it is. They are playing a role. It's operating out of an unbalanced chakra. And they need their followers to continue to validate them for who they are. Okay? And we could just sit back and watch pretty much most of them fall into this trap where they just can't let the spiritual balance side of them put the information out there, out of love, out of freeing the people, out of letting folks know that they come from prosperity. They are of prosperity. The information becomes, I'm really, really great. I'm the master in this particular subject because look at all of the things that I put out here. That starts driving out of an unbalanced heart chakra, quote, quote, egotizing, or as they simply put it, ego or egotistical. Okay? I mean, all of them that I have seen so far are falling into this trap. Then when it comes to the point of monetizing off of the sacred information, this is the same behavior that we saw back in the day, or not we saw, our ancestors witness when we were warring with the other tribes. Because you had tribes that did not want to cut deals with folks. The Europeans, they didn't see the need to cut the deals. They felt they had everything, not felt, they knew they already had everything they needed. Okay? But the other set of folks felt that they did. Okay? All of these things come from an imbalance of self. And specifically, anytime that you are searching for something outside of self, you're needing someone, something to validate you. That is an unbalanced heart chakra. That is the definition of ego or egotized or egotistical. Okay, so I'm going to pause in case somebody want to put on it. If not, go ahead, Sean.
You can also look at the ego as an energy vampire. Because it feeds off the energy. Whether you're talking about celebrities, singers, actors, athletes, they feed off of people worshiping them. They feed off of people cheering. They feed off of people calling out their name. Same with Jesus. Same with Allah, Buddha, whatever name you want to name. All the same thing. It's ego. And like she said, searching outside yourself, giving your energy to somebody else, and they enjoy it. It actually keeps them alive. On many levels, they become addicted to it. Their ego is constantly telling them that that's what they need.
Yep. And the interesting point, and thank you for bringing that up about the energy, because that's a very big component of it, because they cannot either balance their own energy or create their own energy. Not that they can't, they're just unwilling to. Or don't know how to. Okay, it could be one or the two. It could be a younger soul that has not mastered how to create their own energy and balance their existing energies. Very good example as we speak on celebrities, and I'm going to have to pick on these two per se because I don't really care for them. That's just me. But specifically, Beyonce and Jay-Z, they are notoriously known, and the populace don't know what they're doing, but those of us that study, quote, quote, the occult or on the spiritual side, we know exactly what the fuck they're doing. They constantly create these sigils, these symbols, because that's all a sigil is. It is a connection of angels, angles of light. Okay, you may think of it as a symbol, but it has a meaning behind it to capture light, and light is energy. Okay, but both of them are famous for creating sigils with symbols and using words, aka spells, to cipher energy. And in particular, when they are in concert, they get a lot of benefit from that, from an energy perspective. So they are getting people coming and going because they're getting you to spend your currency to give them energy that way. Then when they get you in the arena, they're ciphering the energy that you are giving to them. And it is known that Jay-Z throws up some little sign. His fans know what the fuck what it is. I think it's the Hova sign he throws up. That is ciphering that energy to him. Okay. Beyonce does the same thing, but she literally takes on other entities' persona to cipher energy. Okay. And in the meantime, folks are looking at them as this power couple. They're this, they're that, blah, blah, etc. And they're actually just ciphering the populace energy. They couldn't even be who they are without ciphering that particular populace energy. So that is a very good analogy of how the particular celebrities, especially the mega celebrities, use ciphering of the energy, but they are operating out of the ego being unbalanced, or that heart chakra, I apologize, that heart chakra being unbalanced.
Yes. You can even take that. You could even take that to politicians and religious leaders.
Absolutely.
Pastors,
absolutely,
especially in the black church. Oh, Reverend such and such, he do such a lovely sermon. I mean, everything is about the Reverend.
Exactly.
Not about the message. The Reverend getting new cars. The Reverend get to sleep with everybody's wife. And
yeah, he kicking it.
In some cases, he be bothered their boys, and I mean, talk about egos, and they forgive them.
They forgive them and keep letting them cipher their spiritual energy, cipher the currency, literally give them their currency, and then let them cipher from them physically. Okay? And because they're operating out of an unbalanced chakra, the folks that are being preyed on, you're operating out of an unbalanced chakra as well. Because if you weren't, there's no way that you would allow yourself to be ciphered like that. Because you're looking at them as a god, something that you need outside of yourself. So you are, in fact, out of balance as well. So, absolutely. So, of course, and I hate to use the term master teacher because he doesn't like it, but Brother Bobby Hemmett, of course, always knocks it out the park. I'm going to play a clip from him. It's only 6 minutes long. We don't have that much time. But this is Bobby Hemmett on being overly invested in your ego and its mundane human goals. And this is off of the YouTube channel Masterly Foolish. I highly recommend that YouTube channel. They really put out a lot of great information, and they chop up the clips small. Sorry, that's why. Let me make sure this is the right. Damn it. On being overly invested. Bear with me, family. I thought I had the YouTube video. Just a second here. Brother Bobby, I got a lot of his stuff, and rightfully so. Damn it, I really wanted to play that one.
Yeah, but ego comes into play with the politicians, whereas they think they're more important than the people they're supposed to be representing. They get themselves raises and say that you're not supposed to make a lot of money.
Well, and here's the thing here. I found a video, but here's the thing. Just to show you how everyone is under a spell, and folks' chakras aren't balanced. What the fuck do you need someone to legislate, govern your mental? So of course they're gonna feel like they're all that in the bag of chips, because the system itself is fuckery. Just the fact that people literally go out and vote for somebody to govern over their mental is fucked up within itself. So they get exactly what they deserve. They continue to support a system that does not have their best interest at heart. And it ain't gonna never have their best interest at heart. Shit, based on what we just went over tonight, it ain't got the Slavs' best motherfucking interest at heart. And definitely not the indigenous people. Because it was built on the Slavs taking the position of what the crown nobility was taking. And those same Slavs in office that's running the corporation is still fucking beholden to the crown. The crown never succeeded from the corporation owing them. Goddammit, they still gotta pay them. So the whole thing itself is bankrupt, physically and spiritually. So, okay, here we go with this clip. I think we have enough time. It's only 9 minutes. Here we go.
But I'm not talking about the humility where you don't have no confidence. I'm talking about the humility to say that right now, whether you feel at this particular time that you have appeased yourself in what you think life is supposed to be and you didn't meet that goal, it's all right. As a matter of fact, that's one of the damn problems. We got too many goals. so much goes into it in so many words. We're worrying about shit. You see what I'm saying? Without looking what we have right around us at this particular time. This stuff is going on now, but we worried about some gold in the future. And they got us on some fast track 7 years away, and the shit is going on right now. You see what I'm saying? And that's what a career does. They tell you to set these goals. You see what I'm saying? And you've already eliminated the space between where you are now. You see what I'm saying? And where that goal is, you completely eliminated because you're looking way in the future, and that ain't guaranteed, and you probably won't even manifest that when it gets to that particular point. Because the future gonna always be now. You see what I'm saying? So that's the type of thing about annihilation of self. That's very important this particular time, where you become nothing. Only 3 motherfuckers now, them niggas, they got hit in Louisiana, and they don't even know it. Then you done lost everything. No, you done lost an illusion. Y'all didn't have enough money to get in the damn car and get the hell out of Louisiana, so what the fuck did you really lose? You free now. You ain't got to pay nobody shit. You are where we trade and still go every month. Oh, Lord, the bills is coming. That's how I pay every month, and this shit that happen to these people, they don't know they free. They don't have to worry about that no more. You see? You know, they don't have to worry about that. In so many words, Bob Bush did say, you know, her shit was derogatory. But my point here is, that's the key what we're talking about is focusing on this importance of self. That's why when I saw my shirt was split today, I was about to put the shit on the goddamn camera because all that's going on. I think, well, hell, damn, I've seen people with worse shit than that in the last 2 damn weeks. At least I ain't got to be ashamed to take my shirt up on the damn camera and stuff. You see? So here we go again. To line this thing up, you have to deal with something other. And the first thing you got to do is get rid of that person in the way, and that is yourself. I'm not talking about a cliche. I'm talking about literally. You see what I'm saying? This person that we worry so much about has to be eliminated. You see. Not the people, not the masses. We got to do it. And let that particular divine entity come through. You see. But there's that which is standing in the way, which is ourselves and our fucking goals, which is only illusion. And one thing that this thing showed the last couple of weeks is how much of an illusion it is when it is already gone. You see what I'm saying? You don't have nothing. You see, and then you got to beg on people just to give you some shit that you would throw away 2 weeks before. You see what I'm saying? So this is the concept when we talk about of this particular no self that we're trying to get to. What we're trying to get to because I went to no self, like I said on one of my tapes on October the 16th, 2002, where basically I sat in the chair and immediately went to a level of the Bobby Hemmett was gone, and I was very lonely for a minute because I said, goddamn, Bobby is gone. His ass just like, just disappeared. And it was a level of no self and stuff like that. Then I found out how insignificant this whole thing was. But then again, the whole thing was I immediately found the other part, or the other part of self, which is that higher self, but that particular part that I know of as the ego, was neutralized.
The enemy.
Was neutralized, and that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. Get a movie called Joe versus the Volcano. Came out in 1992. Highly metaphysical movie. Tom Hanks and what's the girl name? The other girl was married to Dennis Quaid. Can't think of her name right now. Tom Hanks, blonde, in Meg Ryan. Hell of a movie. Meg Ryan tells Joe, who is Tom Hanks, she said, my father says that everybody on this planet is asleep, and there's only a few of us awake, and the ones that are awake are in constant amazement. I said, I can testify to that shit.
That's right.
Just like the nigga walking down the damn street. I'm amazed. The other day we turned off I-20 out in Atlanta and got on the highway, and it was two niggas walking in the middle of the highway like they on a country dirt road. You see this shit? Now I'm not talking about on the side. No, these motherfuckers in the middle of the highway, totally oblivious like they down a dirt road. I said, look at them damn niggas like this. That's what I'm talking about, constant amazement. Totally amazed and stuff like that. Now, did anybody try this with the water thing yet to let you know what kind of thing you do with?
Yeah, man. I just did.
Take one of these and chew it up.
I just did.
And then probably drink some water.
It ain't that good.
Do you feel the bitter taste? That bitter taste, obviously. Huh? And I was like, oh shit, I done got some poison water when I first did it. Obviously, that's cleaning up something. Mm-hmm. So you can have personal desires, but personal goals. Personal desire is. That's a different thing. But then again, if it's a personal desire that is affecting, my personal desire is, they got some shit called birthday cake ice cream. You about to taste this shit? Damn me like still that's a personal desire. It's fine. I knew it was the winter when I went back to the supermarket and couldn't find shit. The niggas brought it up. It's like, maybe I got that down in the cup, that shit up. Huh? Birthday cake ice cream. They got Hershey's called, they got a birthday, man. That shit, man, make you. Then, you know, then that's personal design. I went to the Coca-Cola place back in 2001 and in 91. They opened this Coca-Cola museum down in Atlanta. So they got this Coca-Cola and they got these sodas that shoot out from around the world. So they had this apple Fanta that they sell in Germany, France, but they didn't have it in America. And the motherfuckers came out with that shit about a month ago here. So I bought me a 6-pack of that shit. You see, that's a personal desire. But I'm just saying, as far as personal goals and stuff like that, it's like, you follow up on it, because what else you got to do? But you don't really let it become a part of you. We got to get out of this disappointment of being failed at nothing. Ain't shit, you know what I'm saying? Wait till that goddamn gas bill gets your ass this month. You'll find out that none of this other shit is important. But the gas gonna be like, you take that shit out there and them cars was high. They say the gas shit, when you pump in your house, motherfuckers ain't gonna survive. You see what I'm saying? But I'm just saying, you gotta understand what's important.
Okay, so that was a clip from Brother Bobby Hemmett off a Masterly Foolish YouTube channel called Bobby Hemmett on being overly invested in your ego and mundane human goals. So I'll pause in case somebody want to put something on it. If not, we'll move on because I did have another clip because we're running out of time that I wanted to play for the family called Being Fooled by the Ego for Brother Bobby Hemmett. Sorry, y'all, I was looking for the clip. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and play that clip. So hold on a second here. It's only 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back and talk about it and kind of wrap up.
Now, going back to the whole meditation structure, dealing with the inner child here is there's got to be a form of confidence. And there's a difference between confidence and arrogance, you see. And I often wonder why, basically, for most of the 90s, I was like a damn fool and fucked around and charged $300 for lectures. Ended up being broke. But on one hand, it's a balancing out process and all, because the simple fact and all, because I stayed on the humble level, that was my form of getting the ego in check. You see what I'm saying? Getting the ego in check or whatever the type aspect. Or in the aspect of the point that I didn't want nothing to do with nobody after the actual lecture was good also too, because the simple fact that we got a lot of people that won't follow us. So this was my way of dealing with the whole ego thing. I didn't want no followers. I really didn't give a damn what you thought. Especially if I told you some shit and you didn't go check it out on your own, and you was a damn fool anyway. You know what I'm saying? You know, I really wouldn't trust anybody that I won't be able to have a substantial amount of things that I check out on my own, both in the bibliography realm or just basically on the psychic realm. Some things just basically your spirit tells you what's true or not. But the point I'm trying to make here is, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, there are hierarchies. There are hierarchies, and there are also forces battling for supremacy. These forces of battling for supremacy is not necessarily good or evil. It's more what they call polaria. Polaria means that you have forces or energies or formulas battling for supremacy. These polarias are what they call these particular two dual systems are not necessarily good or evil, but they are intelligence. And these particular intelligence, whether they be for you or against you, and the ones that will be for against you, basically can metastasize in you or manifest in you through ego. You see what I'm saying? Through ego. Now let me give you an example. Met a sister a couple of months ago, opened her up to start channeling. She became excellent psychic or an excellent channel. But she kept asking these questions. Did you tell the people who I am? Did you tell the people what I can do? Do they all know about me? You know what I'm saying? Do they all know about me? So she was more interested in basically her, and I mean, now here's a woman that in 1998 was in the Christian church. So we got people that just fell off the wagon yesterday. She was in the Christian church in 98. But all of a sudden she has this psychic ability. And even in Elijah Muhammad used to say that unseasoned knowledge is dangerous to the virgin mind. Now, I get to see this at first hand. You tell them who I am, do they know who I am? You know, on and on, you know, and as a result, when there were certain forces that came out against us, these forces were able to use the actual sister, and I've seen this happen to brothers, because of the ego, they were able to enter and burrow themselves into the mind. And these particular people go crazy. So they say that a person that says that they have merged their ego with the divine and they are all these light bringers and all have done nothing of the sort. Only thing they have done is basically manifested or magnified or multiplied the actual ego. And the ego tells them that they are so divine. And they lose sight of things. This is a major thing that is happening. It's in the movie Little Buddha. When so-called Buddha was under the what is called the fig tree, and he was meditating, and the ego found that it could not get him on any kind of way. The ego finally came and said, "You are the greatest. You are so beautiful. You are a magnificent woman." And Buddha turned around and said, "Even that is not going to even magnify. Even you can't even get me with even playing with my actual ego to say that I'm the greatest one." And then the ego just got so mad and it just popped apart.
All right. So that was by Brother Bobby Hemmett, called On Love and Neutralizing the Ego. And that's, again, off of the YouTube channel, Masterly Foolish. So I'm going to pause in case Sister Brother Sean, you want to put something on it before I put my 2 cents on it, and then we're going to wrap up.
I'm good, sir.
Okay. So only thing I just want to reiterate with the ego, I know we didn't spend a lot of time on it tonight, but to be quite frankly honest, we really don't need to spend a lot of time on it. The purpose of this show is for each and every one of us to enter and understand the difference between knowing thyself and operating from out of ego or egotized or egotistical when you are looking outside of self for validation, whether that be from a monetary perspective, physical perspective, conscious perspective, from praise, etc., etc. And I see this being played out over and over. You know, Brother Sean brought up an excellent point. We see it being played out in the musical or entertainment perspective. You see it played out in a political perspective, and even in the arena that you would think particular group of folks are supposed to be woke, quote, quote, we're still seeing egotistical or that heart chakra being unbalanced, being played out as folks who either allow themselves to be put on pedestals or put themselves on pedestals to have followers essentially worship them for information. And whether or not you're doing that as the one that is gaining followers, or whether or not you are the one, on the other hand, following someone and giving them your undivided energy and not operating out of the divine being that you are. Just enter and understand that you are operating from a place of your heart chakra not being balanced. And that is very, very dangerous. And again, that has gotten us in the situation that we are in today with not knowing self, being stricken of identity, okay? And we can go all the way back to the show that we did when we were talking about Lemuria and Atlantis and how the introduction of language started the beginning of the fall, because that was divorcing you from your true self. Okay? Now most are operating out of ego, and then you can even break it down to alter ego. We didn't talk about that tonight with alter ego. And you see a lot of these entertainers literally create alter egos. I think Beyonce is one. That Sasha Fierce shit operate out of alter ego. So you're even splitting yourself in this matrix even further and further divorcing self from truly who you are. Okay, so that's what I wanted the family to get out of this show regarding ego. Be very, very careful, be aware of it, and enter and understand that anytime you are seeking something outside of self to validate you, your heart chakra isn't balanced. So you need to do some self-reflection and self-work to bring yourself back in balance. So I'm going to go around for last words because we only going to have a couple of minutes. Sis Sandra, you have any last words for the family?
Well, I think it's a good thing to know who you are. I think it's a good thing to know what you stand for, because if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. So it's our responsibility to not emote all the time, but to know. We need to know what we are and who we are and whom we belong to and where our purposes are. And I have to say that there's violence all over this planet. And if you participate in the violence, you become the violence. And so we need to understand that violence doesn't solve anything. And we need to tap into our higher self instead of the lower self of killing and destroying. That's all I have to say.
Indeed. Brother Sean, you have any last words for the family?
We have to stop. There's no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want change if you want something new, the old must be destroyed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
There is no compromise in the system.
That's right.
The system itself is formed. The system itself is the beast.
Yes.
Anybody can operate the system. It don't depend on the person's color or whatever. A monkey can run the system.
Yep.
It's the system that has to go.
Indeed. And, my last words to the family, thank you so much for being patient with us tonight. I know we took more time on the follow-up stuff with the Slavs, but it still all ties in because everyone as a collective is running around, don't know who the hell they are, do not know their true origins. So everyone, for the most part, is living not in their true self. So they're literally living in an illusion within an illusion within an illusion. Okay? So now the veil has been lifted. And everyone has the opportunity, the information is there. Mama Earth is shooting across the ethers, all of this energy, and including in that energy is this information. It is open to everyone. And if you're not working on mastering self-love, learning who you are, who your ancestors are, then you will not pick up on that energy wave. Okay? So hopefully that's what the family got out of this. I do want to thank everyone for your participation on this journey with us tonight. We will be back next week. Don't know what the topic's going to be yet. But I look forward to chopping it up with you all next week. And thanks to my co-hosts, Brother Sean and Sis Sandra. Love you very much for being on this journey with me. And we are going to, we're going to rock out with some music. Love you, family.